The museum was quiet on this Tuesday morning. Admiral Daewon walked slowly through the halls, his footsteps echoing on the polished floor. Around him stood the ghosts of another time. Massive warships, now silent and empty, hung from the ceiling on thick cables. Their guns were sealed. Their engines were cold. Children ran beneath them, laughing and playing, not understanding what these machines once did. Daewon was 73 years old. His hair had turned completely white years ago. The uniform he wore was more for ceremony than function. He was one of the last humans who remembered the wars, one of the last who had seen what humanity could do when it chose violence. "Admiral, they're ready for you," a young assistant said. She was maybe 25, with bright eyes and a smile that had never seen war. Her name was Hai Lim, and she worked as a guide at the Museum of Reconciliation. Daewon nodded and followed her to the main hall. Today was the 300th anniversary of the Isolation Treaty. 300 years since humanity had decided to stop fighting. 300 years since they had withdrawn from the galaxy and chosen peace. The hall was full of people. Students mostly. They sat in neat rows waiting to hear him speak. Daewon looked at them and felt old. These young people had grown up in paradise. They had never known hunger or fear. They had never heard the sound of ships tearing apart in space. They thought peace was natural, something that just happened. 300 years ago, Daewon began, his voice steady. Humanity made a choice. We had been fighting for centuries. The expansion wars had spread across dozens of star systems. Millions had died. We had become very good at killing. He paused, looking at the faces watching him. Some looked bored. Others were checking their communication devices. We had weapons that could crack planets, ships that moved like predators, tactics that other species feared. But we realized something important. Being good at war doesn't mean you should do it. So we stopped. We came here to the sanctuary belt and we locked the weapons away. We chose to be different. The students clapped politely when he finished. It was the same speech he gave every year. The same message. War is bad. Peace is good. Remember the past but never repeat it. After the ceremony, Daewon stood in front of an old dreadnought called the Iron Wind. He had served on a ship like this once, 50 years ago, right at the end of the military service era. The ship was painted white now, a peace color. But he remembered when it had been dark gray, nearly invisible against the black of space. Do you think they understand? Hai Lim had followed him. She stood beside him, looking up at the massive ship. No, Daewon said honestly. How could they? They've never had to fight for anything. Is that bad? No, he said again, but slower this time. It's what we wanted. What we fought to give them. Hai Lim smiled at him. She believed in this peace completely. She had written her doctoral thesis on xenobiology, studying alien species and how to understand them better. She thought humanity's greatest achievement was learning to talk instead of fight. Far from the museum, on the edge of the sanctuary belt, Captain Rockhan was having a very boring day. His ship, the Morning Calm, was a transport vessel. It carried supplies between human colonies. It was safe work, easy work, the kind of work that let you forget that space could be dangerous. Rockhan was 47 and had served briefly in the Sanctuary Defense Fleet when he was young. But that was more like a coast guard than a military. They rescued broken ships and stopped smugglers. They hadn't fired a weapon in anger in 200 years. "Captain, we're approaching Relay Station Gamma 7, his communications officer said. Her name was Aranam, and she had been with him for 6 years. Good at her job, reliable, never complained. Run the standard checks, Rockhan said. Let's get this done and get home. Relay Station Gamma 7 was one of hundreds of automated stations that sat on the border of human space. They monitored space, relayed messages, and basically did nothing interesting. Checking on them was required by regulation, but it was the most boring job in the fleet. As they approached, Aranam frowned at her screens. "Captain, something's wrong. The station is on emergency power." Rockhan sat up straighter. "When did it switch to emergency power?" "According to the logs, 3 days ago." "Why didn't it send an alert?" "It did, but the message never made it past the local buoys. The communication array is damaged." Rockhan felt a small knot of worry in his stomach. In 300 years of peace, things sometimes broke. But relay stations were built tough. What could damage one? They docked with the station and sent a repair team aboard. What they found made no sense. The communication array hadn't broken down. It had been destroyed. Burn marks scarred the metal. Something had shot at it. Pirates? Aranam suggested, but she didn't sound convinced. Out here? Rakhan shook his head. There's nothing to steal. The station's AI was still functioning on backup power. Rakhan accessed its memory core and pulled up the recordings from 3 days ago. What he saw made his blood run cold. The screen showed space outside the station, peaceful and quiet. Then suddenly ships appeared. Dozens of them. They were organic-looking, like they had been grown instead of built. Dark purple and black with sections that pulsed like living tissue. The ships ignored the relay station at first. They moved toward a small moon that orbited a nearby gas giant. Rakhan knew that moon. It had a colony on it. The Neri people lived there. They were artists and philosophers, peaceful beings who had never hurt anyone. The recording showed what happened next. The alien ships surrounded the moon. They began firing, not at military targets because there weren't any. They fired at everything. Buildings, farms, the small spaceport. The destruction was methodical and complete. Then the alien ships landed and began harvesting. That was the only word for it. They were taking everything. Resources, materials, even the bodies. Rakhan watched in horror as the colony died. The whole thing took 6 hours. When the alien ships left, nothing remained alive on that moon. Captain, Aranam's voice was shaking. I'm picking up a signal from the moon. It's very weak. A survivor? Maybe, but Captain, the signal is broadcasting on old human military frequencies, the kind we haven't used in 300 years. Rakhan ordered the morning comm to move toward the moon. His hands were steady, but his mind was racing. Those frequencies were in the history books. Why would anyone use them now? It took them 2 hours to reach the moon. The colony was gone. Nothing but rubble and ash remained. But deep in what had been a shelter, they found a communication device. It was still broadcasting. Aranam worked carefully to extract the message. When she played it, a translator converted the Neri language to human speech. The voice was young and scared. To the humans who once stood against the dark, my name is Talitha. I studied your history. I read about your wars and how you stopped fighting. I know you chose peace, but we are dying. The Krell came and they took everything. Everyone I love is dead. I found these old frequency codes in an ancient database. I don't know if you still exist. I don't know if you still care. But please, if you can hear this, we have no one else to call. Please help us, the message ended. Rakhan stood in the silence that followed. Around him, his crew was completely still. They had all grown up in peace. They had been taught that war was something humans used to do, a shameful part of their past. But now someone was calling them. Someone was dying, and that someone had reached back through 300 years of history to find a frequency that once meant help was coming. Rakhan made a decision. Aranam, send this recording to Sanctuary Prime. Flag it as Priority 1. Send it to the Defense Fleet, to the government, to everyone who needs to hear it. Yes, Captain. As the message transmitted, Rakhan looked at the destroyed moon. Somewhere in that rubble, Talitha was probably dead. But her message was alive, and it was about to wake something that had been sleeping for a very long time. On Sanctuary Prime, in his small apartment, Admiral Day Wan received the message in the middle of the night. He sat in the darkness and listened to Talitha's plea. He listened to the fear in her voice. He listened to her desperate hope that humanity still existed. When it ended, he sat there for a long time. Then he picked up his communication device and made a call. The person who answered was Colonel Han Tae. She lived deep underground in a facility that officially didn't exist. This is Day Wan, he said. Begin extraction protocol. Authorization. War giant rising. There was silence on the other end. Then Colonel Han Tae spoke, her voice rough from sleep. Admiral, do you understand what you're authorizing? Yes, Day Wan said. Someone called for help. Someone who believed we still cared. We need to decide if she was right. He ended the call and looked out his window at the peaceful city. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, humanity would have to choose between the peace they loved and the principles that peace was supposed to protect. The sleeping giant was waking up. The emergency council meeting started at dawn. Chancellor Jin Kwan sat at the head of a long table, looking tired. He had been woken up 3 hours ago to hear Talitha's message. He had listened to it 7 times since then. Each time, it made his stomach hurt a little more. Around the table sat the most important people in the human coalition. Military officers, government ministers, scientists, and historians. They all looked uncomfortable. This was a conversation they had never expected to have. "Let me make sure I understand," said Commander Bo Yun, head of Sanctuary Intelligence. She was 40 years old, sharp-eyed, and known for being practical. An alien species we've never heard of attacked an Airy colony. They killed everyone and harvested the resources. And now we're considering getting involved. "A survivor asked for our help," said Hai Lim. "She had been invited because she was an expert on alien species. We can't just ignore that." "Why not?" Bo Yun's voice was cold. "We've ignored the galaxy for 300 years. That was the whole point of the isolation treaty. We stay here. They stay there. Everyone is safer." "Safer?" Admiral Daewon spoke quietly, but everyone listened. "Who is safer?" "The Nairi are dead." Bo Yun didn't look away. "That's tragic. But it's not our responsibility. We chose peace. That means we don't get involved in other people's wars." "This isn't a war," said Professor Chan Wu. He was old, nearly as old as Daewon, and he taught military history at the university. "This is extermination." "There's a difference." "Show them the rest," Daewon said. The lights dimmed. A holographic display appeared above the table. It showed a map of the galaxy. Red dots marked locations across the outer rim. There were 17 of them. "These are confirmed attacks by the Krell," Daewon explained. 17 different species. All of them peaceful. All of them completely destroyed. The Krell don't conquer. They don't negotiate. They arrive, they take everything, and they leave nothing alive. "How long has this been happening?" Chancellor Jin Quan asked. 8 years. We didn't know because we don't monitor the outer rim closely anymore. But once we started looking, the pattern was clear. Another image appeared. This one showed the Krell's movement pattern. The red dots formed a spiral, moving inward toward the galactic core, toward the more populated regions, toward the sanctuary belt. "They're coming this way," Hai Lim said softly. "Yes," Daewon confirmed. "If they maintain their current pattern, they'll reach the sanctuary belt in approximately 18 months. The room was silent. Everyone stared at the map. The comfortable peace they had known suddenly felt fragile. "What does the galactic community say about this?" asked Jin Quan. "Nothing useful," Bo Yun answered. "The major powers are arguing about territory and trade rights. The Velkari Dominion thinks the Krell can be negotiated with. The Threen Collective wants to form a research committee. The Osir Commonwealth is more interested in selling weapons than using them. Nobody is actually doing anything." "Because they don't remember," Chan Wu said. 300 years ago, the galaxy feared humanity. They knew we could fight, but now? They think we're harmless. They think the old stories were exaggerated. "Maybe that's good," said one of the ministers. "Maybe being underestimated is the best defense." "Not against the Krell," Daewon said. "They don't care about reputation. They don't care about fear. They just consume and move on." Chancellor Jin Quan rubbed his face. He had been in politics for 20 years, but nothing had prepared him for this. "What are our options?" "We strengthen our defenses," Bo Yun said immediately. "We fortify the sanctuary belt, build more weapons platforms, increase the fleet. But we stay here. We protect what's ours." "That's not enough," Daewon argued. "If the Krell destroy all the species between here and there, we'll face them alone. And they'll be stronger, having consumed 17 civilizations. So what do you suggest?" "We go to war. We abandon everything we've built for 300 years? I suggest we help those who ask for it. We stop the Krell before they get stronger. We show the galaxy that peace doesn't mean weakness." The argument went on for hours. Some people supported Bo Yun's defensive strategy. Others agreed with Daewon, but nobody had an easy answer. Finally, Hai Lim spoke up. She had been quiet for most of the meeting, just listening. "Can I say something?" Everyone turned to look at her. She was young compared to most people in the room. She had never served in any military. She had spent her life studying alien cultures and promoting understanding. "I believe in our peace," she said. "I think choosing to stop fighting was the best thing humanity ever did. But I've been thinking about Tel Etha's message. She didn't call us because we're peaceful. She called us because she thought we might still care. She believed that humans, even after 300 years, might help someone in trouble." Hai Lim looked around the table. "If we ignore her, if we just protect ourselves and let everyone else die, then what is our peace worth? We'll be safe, but we'll be alone, and we'll know that we chose comfort over compassion." The room was quiet again. Jinquan looked at each person at the table. He could see the fear and the doubt. But he could also see something else. A determination. A memory of who humans used to be. "We need to vote," he said. "This is too important for me to decide alone." The vote was close. Very close. But in the end, the decision was made. Humanity would respond. They would help the Neri if any survivors remained. And they would face the Krell. But first, they needed to remember how to fight. Deep beneath Sanctuary Prime, Colonel Han Te walked through corridors that hadn't seen light in decades. The archives were cold and dark. Emergency lights flickered on as she passed, revealing what had been hidden. Han Tai was 56 years old. She had been assigned to the archives 30 years ago, as punishment for questioning orders. Her superiors thought maintaining mothballed warships was a waste of her talents. They were wrong. She had spent 3 decades keeping these machines alive, checking systems, running maintenance, making sure that if humanity ever needed them again, they would work. Most people thought she was crazy. Some thought she was dangerous. But Admiral Daewon had understood. He had protected her assignment and her work. Now, as she activated the main power systems, the archives began to wake. Lights came on in massive hangar bays. Engines hummed as they powered up for the first time in centuries. And the ships, the beautiful, terrible ships, began to emerge from their storage. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, battleships. Each one had been sealed in preservation gel, protected from time and decay. Now that gel was draining away, revealing the dark gray hulls underneath, these were not the painted museum pieces that children played beneath. These were weapons. Han Tai stood in front of the largest ship in the archives. It was a Titan-class battleship over 2 kilometers long. Its name was Eternal Vigil. She had maintained this ship with her own hands for 30 years, never knowing if anyone would ever crew it again. "Computer, run full diagnostic on all ships," she ordered. The response came immediately. "Diagnostic running. Estimated completion time, 48 hours. Preliminary data shows all primary systems functional. Minor repairs needed on secondary systems," Han Tai smiled. They had worked. All her years of lonely maintenance had been worth it. On the surface, the news was spreading. The government had announced the decision to help the Neri. The reaction was mixed. Many young people protested. They had been raised to believe war was wrong, always wrong, no matter the reason. They carried signs that said, "Not our fight and peace now," but others understood. The older generation, the ones who remembered stories from their grandparents, began volunteering. Veterans who had never expected to serve again dusted off their old uniforms. Engineers who knew the old military systems came forward to help. Captain Rakhan received new orders. The morning comm was being requisitioned by the military. He and his crew were being transferred to a destroyer called the Righteous Dawn. He would be its captain. When Aranam heard the news, she looked scared. "Captain, I'm a civilian communications officer. I don't know how to serve on a warship." "Neither do I," Rakhan admitted. "Not really, but we're going to learn." The training began immediately. Professor Chan Wu was brought in to teach tactics to officers who had never studied war. He opened old databases and showed them battle recordings from 300 years ago. What they saw amazed and horrified them. Human ships moved like dancers, perfectly coordinated. Every vessel knew where the others were, what they were doing, where they needed to be. The tactics were complex but efficient, brutal but precise. "Your ancestors didn't win battles through strength alone," Chan Wu explained. "They won through perfect coordination. Every ship was part of a larger whole. Every action served the plan. That's what you need to relearn." A young officer raised her hand. Her name was Sol Beck, and at 28 she was the youngest person to be given a command position. "Professor, these tactics seem cruel. We're targeting life support systems. Stranding crews. Is that really necessary?" Chan Wu looked at her seriously. "War is cruel, Captain Baek. The question is whether you're cruel efficiently or wastefully. Human doctrine was designed to end fights quickly, with the minimum total suffering. Yes, we targeted life support, because a ship without air surrenders, and a surrendered ship means fewer total deaths. The Neri system was burning when the human fleet arrived. 3 Krell bioships hung in orbit around the colony moon, continuing their harvest. They moved slowly, methodically, like insects cleaning a carcass. Their organic hulls pulsed with an ugly purple light. On the bridge of Last Hope, Admiral Day Wan watched the tactical display. His hands were steady, but his heart was beating fast. This was real. After 300 years of peace, humanity was about to fight again. Sensor report, he ordered. 3 Krell ships in orbit, Admiral. Size classification, heavy cruisers. No shields detected, but their hulls appear to be very thick organic material. Unknown composition. Any sign of survivors on the moon? Scanning now. We're detecting 17 life signs. All Nairi. They're hiding in what's left of the underground shelter network. 17. Out of 40,000. Daewon closed his eyes for a moment. They were too late to save the colony, but 17 was better than 0. Admiral, the Krell ships are changing course. They're moving to intercept us. Expected. All ships move to Formation Beta. Target priority is the Krell vessels. We need to eliminate them before they can call for reinforcements. Across the fleet, captains acknowledged the order. The human ships moved smoothly into a triangular formation, with Last Hope at the center. It was a standard defensive pattern, the kind taught in the first week of training. Captain Rock Han watched his crew work. They were nervous, but they followed procedures exactly. Aranam coordinated communications with the rest of the fleet, her voice calm despite the tension. His weapons officer, a young man named Kai Wan, kept his hands on the firing controls. Captain, the Krell are targeting us, Ki Wan said. Evasive pattern Alpha. Rock Han ordered. Stay with the formation. The Righteous Dawn rolled smoothly to one side as the first Krell weapon fired. It wasn't an energy beam or a missile. It was something biological. A glob of organic matter that moved like it was alive. Where it hit empty space, it seemed to dissolve into nothing. But Rock Han knew if it hit his ship, it would probably eat through the hull. All ships weapons free, Admiral Daewon commanded. Fire at will. The human fleet opened fire. Missiles streaked across the darkness. Energy beams cut through space like knives. The Krell ships responded, their organic weapons spitting acid and what looked like living projectiles. The first Krell ship died quickly. Human missiles overwhelmed its point defense and explosions rippled across its hull. The organic material that made up its armor burned and tore. Within minutes, the ship was breaking apart. But the other 2 Krell ships were learning. They moved faster, avoided the obvious attack patterns. Their weapons targeted human engines and communication arrays, trying to cripple rather than destroy. Captain Saul Bayek commanded the swift return, a light cruiser on the fleet's left flank. She watched the tactical display and saw what the Krell were doing. They were smart. They adapted quickly. Weapons, target their propulsion nodes, she ordered. Those pulse points on their rear sections. I think that's how they move, her crew obeyed. The swift return's energy cannons focused fire on the glowing sections of a Krell ship. The accuracy was perfect. The Krell ship shuddered and slowed. Its movements became sluggish. All ships, this is Captain Bayek, she broadcast on the fleet channel. Target the pulse points, rear sections where their hulls glow. That's their weak point. Other captains heard and adjusted their fire. The second Krell ship died 10 minutes later, torn apart by concentrated weapons fire. The third ship tried to run, but it was too slow. The human fleet surrounded it and destroyed it methodically. The battle lasted 23 minutes. When it ended, 3 Krell ships were debris and the human fleet had suffered only minor damage. 2 ships had hull breaches. 1 had lost its primary communication array, but no one had died. On the Last Hope, Admiral Daewon allowed himself a small moment of relief. Then he remembered the 17 survivors on the moon below. All medical ships begin rescue operations. I want those survivors extracted within the hour. Dr. Hai Lim was aboard the medical ship Gentle Mercy. She had insisted on coming with the fleet, arguing that the survivors would need someone who understood alien biology. Now she prepared to go down to the moon's surface. The shelter where the survivors hid was deep underground. The entrance had collapsed during the Krell attack, but human engineers cut through the rubble. When Hai Lim entered the shelter, she found the Neri huddled together in the darkness. They were beautiful beings, even in their fear. Tall and slender, with skin that shimmered in different colors depending on the light. Their large eyes watched Hai Lim with desperate hope. My name is Hai Lim, she said through a translator. We received your message. We're here to help. One of the Neri stepped forward. She was young, maybe the equivalent of a human teenager. Her skin was pale with shock and her hands shook. Are you human? She asked. Yes, I sent the message. My name is Talitha. I didn't think anyone would really come. High Lim felt tears in her eyes. She stepped forward and gently touched Talitha's hand. You called for help. We answered. That's what humans do. The evacuation took 2 hours. The 17 Neri survivors were brought aboard the Gentle Mercy. Most were in shock. Some were injured. All of them had lost their entire families. Their whole civilization, gone in a single day. But while the humans rescued the survivors, something else was happening. The Krell ships had sent a signal before they died. A call for help. And the Krell, unlike humans, answered such calls with overwhelming force. 6 hours after the battle ended, while the human fleet was still assessing damage and treating the Neri survivors, the sensors picked up new contacts. Ships were jumping into the system. Lots of them. Admiral, we have incoming, the sensor officer reported. Counting. 27 Krell vessels. Mixed classification. They'll be in weapons range in 15 minutes. Daewon felt ice in his stomach. 27 ships. They had barely handled 3. All ships combat formation Delta. Prepare to receive enemy attack. He switched to a private channel to Han Tai back at the archives. Colonel, I need options. We're outnumbered 9-1. Han Tai's voice came back immediately. Admiral, I'm uploading a tactical database to your fleet network. It's a doctrine called Anvil and Hammer, used by the Third Fleet during the expansion wars. You use the terrain. There is no terrain in space. Yes, there is. You're next to a moon with a debris field from the colony. And there's that gas giant with 2 other moons. Use them, Daewon understood. Space combat didn't happen in empty space. There were always gravity wells, debris fields, radiation zones, things that could be used by a smart commander. All ships, new orders. We're going to pull back toward the moon's debris field, form up in defensive clusters, make them come to us through the wreckage. The human fleet moved quickly, positioning themselves in the thick field of debris from the destroyed colony. Broken buildings, ruined ships, chunks of rock and metal. It was treacherous navigation, but it also provided cover. When the Krell fleet arrived, they found the humans waiting. The Krell moved to attack, confident in their numbers. But they had to navigate through the debris field to reach the human ships. And in the narrow paths through the wreckage, their numbers meant nothing. Captain Rock Han waited behind a massive piece of colony infrastructure. His ship was powered down, almost invisible. When 3 Krell ships passed within range, he powered up and fired everything he had. At point-blank range, the effect was devastating. 2 Krell ships exploded immediately. The third tried to turn but crashed into debris. All across the debris field, human ships were doing the same thing. Waiting, ambushing, using the environment to negate the Krell's numerical advantage. Captain Sol Bayek found herself in trouble when 5 Krell ships cornered her. The swift return was taking heavy fire, its shields failing, but she remembered her training. She remembered what Professor Chan Wu had taught about desperate tactics. Helm, full burn toward the gas giant, maximum speed. Her crew looked at her like she was crazy. Running toward a gas giant meant going deeper into its gravity well. It was dangerous, but the Krell followed, thinking they had her trapped. Solbeck waited until the last possible moment. Then she ordered a full power turn, using the gas giant's gravity to slingshot around it. The swift return pulled 10 Gs. The crew blacked out momentarily. But the ship made the turn. The 5 Krell ships following her didn't. 3 couldn't pull out of the gravity well in time and were pulled into the gas giant's atmosphere. The other 2 collided, trying to avoid the same fate. Admiral Daewon watched the battle from his tactical display. It was chaos, but it was controlled chaos. His captains were fighting smart, using every advantage. The Krell were stronger and more numerous, but they were predictable. They just charged in, using brute force. Humans fought different. Humans used strategy. The battle lasted 3 hours. When it ended, the Krell fleet was destroyed. The human fleet had lost 2 ships completely, and 4 more were badly damaged. 47 humans had died. It was the first human combat death in 300 years. Daewon stood on his bridge looking at the casualty reports. 47 names. The recordings of the Neri battle spread across the galaxy like fire. Every species watched. Every government analyzed. After 300 years of silence, humanity had spoken. And they had spoken in the language of war. In the grand halls of the Velkari Dominion, military strategists studied the human tactics with growing unease. The Velkari had fought the Krell twice and lost both times. They had superior technology and greater numbers, but the Krell always overwhelmed them through sheer persistence. Now they watched humans defeat Krell forces that should have won. How did they do it? The Velkari High Commander demanded. His analysts showed him again and again. Human ships that moved as one mind. Tactics that used the environment. Strategies that turned disadvantages into advantages. It was beautiful and terrifying. On Earth, now mostly empty since humans had spread to other worlds, the old archives were being searched. Military historians found documentation from the expansion wars, battle plans, tactical manuals, after-action reports, everything humanity had learned about warfare, carefully preserved even during the peace years. Professor Chan Wu worked 18-hour days, translating old military doctrine into training materials. Young officers came to him, desperate to learn what their ancestors had known. He taught them about combined arms, about force multiplication, about the philosophy of war. War is not about destroying your enemy, he told them. War is about achieving your objective. Sometimes you achieve it through destruction, sometimes through positioning, sometimes through making your enemy believe you're stronger than you are. The best victory is one where you don't fight at all, because the enemy decides you're not worth fighting. Captain Rakhan was learning this firsthand. The Righteous Dawn had been assigned to patrol routes near the Neri system. They encountered Krell scouts twice more. Both times the scouts ran rather than fight. The Krell were adapting. They had learned that human ships were dangerous, but Rakhan knew this was just the beginning. The Krell weren't giving up. They were planning. In the Sanctuary Belt, Colonel Han Te worked day and night at the archives. More ships were being awakened. Bigger ships, the kind that hadn't been used since the darkest days of the expansion wars. Dreadnoughts that could crack moons. Carriers that launched hundreds of fighters. And the Titans, the massive battleships that had once made entire species surrender without firing a shot. Han Tai stood in front of one such ship. The Eternal Vigil was the largest ship humanity had ever built. 3 kilometers long, armed with weapons that could destroy fleets. For 30 years she had maintained this monster, never believing it would wake. Now it was waking, and Han Tai felt both pride and fear. On the medical ship Gentle Mercy, Dr. Hai Lim worked with the Neri survivors. Talitha was recovering slowly. Physically she was healing. Emotionally she carried scars that might never fade. I have nightmares, Talitha admitted to Hai Lim. I see the Krell ships coming. I hear my family screaming. I wake up thinking I'm still in the shelter waiting to die. Hai Lim held her hand. She had no easy words. How do you comfort someone who has lost everything? You're safe now, was all she could offer. Am I? Talitha looked at her with those large, sad eyes. The Krell are still out there. They won't stop. They never stop. Neither will we, Hai Lim said. Humans are stubborn. When we commit to something, we see it through. Talitha managed a small smile. I read about that. In my studies, humans never give up. Other species surrender when it's logical. Humans fight until they win or die. Is that a good thing? I don't know. But I'm alive because of it. 2 months after the Neri battle, humanity had awakened 137 warships. Young crews trained on old vessels. Veterans came out of retirement to teach. The Sanctuary Defense Fleet, which had been a glorified Coast Guard, was transforming into something else. Something the galaxy hadn't seen in 3 centuries. Captain Sol Bayek had been promoted to Commodore. At 28, she was now in command of 8 ships, a battle group of her own. She stood on the bridge of her new flagship, the unyielding truth, and felt the weight of responsibility. Her group was assigned to protect a cluster of mining colonies on the edge of human space. Not Krell territory yet, but close. The mining colonies were civilian operations, run by people who had never expected to need protection. Commodore, we're receiving a distress call, her communications officer reported. Mining Station Omega, they're under attack. Sol Bayek felt her stomach drop. Krell? Unknown. But they say there are multiple ships and they're firing on the station. All ships, maximum speed to Omega. Battle stations. The journey took 40 minutes. Every minute felt like an hour. When they arrived, Sol Bayek saw 6 Krell ships surrounding the mining station. They weren't firing anymore. They were boarding. Tactical analysis, she ordered. 6 Krell cruisers, medium class. They've breached the station in 3 places. Unknown number of Krell boarding parties inside. Sol Bayek made a decision. Swift Return and Vigilant Eye attack the Krell ships. Keep them busy. Morningstar and Bright Future with me. We're boarding that station." Her officers looked surprised. Humans didn't board ships anymore. Nobody did. It was too dangerous, too uncertain. Modern warfare happened at distance. But there were civilians on that station. Miners, families, children. And the Krell were inside with them. The battle in space was quick. Solbeck's ships outnumbered the Krell and had better tactics. 3 Krell ships were destroyed in the first 10 minutes. The others tried to flee but were hunted down. But the real fight was inside the station. Solbeck led a boarding team personally. They wore combat armor that had been in storage for 300 years. They carried weapons that their ancestors had used. And they moved through the station's corridors hunting Krell. The Krell were terrifying up close. Tall and insectoid with too many legs and mandibles that dripped acid. They were strong and fast and they didn't fear death. But humans had something the Krell didn't expect. Humans fought for each other. When one soldier was in trouble, others came to help. When someone fell, others dragged them to safety. The Krell fought as individuals. Humans fought as a unit. Solbeck found herself face to face with a Krell warrior. It was bigger than her, stronger than her. But she had trained for this. She dodged its first strike, rolled under its second, and fired her weapon point blank into what she hoped was a vital area. The Krell fell. Solbeck stood over it, breathing hard. Around her, her team was winning. The Krell were being pushed back room by room, corridor by corridor. When it was over, they had saved 243 miners. They had lost 8 of their own boarding team. 8 more names on the growing list of human casualties. Solbeck removed her helmet and looked at the rescued miners. They were staring at her with awe and gratitude and fear. "Thank you," one of them said. We thought no one would come." "Someone will always come," Solbeck said. "That's the promise." The news of the mining station rescue spread. More species began to quietly reach out to humanity. Not official government contacts, but quiet messages. Colonies asking for protection. Merchants asking for escorts. Refugees asking for shelter. The human coalition faced a choice. They had committed to helping the Neri, but that was one situation. Now species across the Outer Rim were calling for help. They couldn't protect everyone. Could they? Chancellor Jin Quan called another emergency council. This time the debate was different. Nobody questioned whether humanity should fight. The question was how much they could do. "We have 137 warships," Commander Bo-Yun reported. "We can wake more from the archives, but we need crews. We're training as fast as we can, but it takes time. How many requests for help have we received?" Jin Quan asked. "In the last month, 47. From species all across the Outer Rim. The Krell are expanding faster than predicted. And now that humanity has shown we'll fight, everyone wants our protection." "We can't protect everyone," said one minister. "No," Admiral Day-Wan agreed. "But we can choose who to protect, and we can teach others to protect themselves." That idea changed everything. Instead of just fighting for others, humanity began sharing knowledge. Not advanced weapons technology, but tactics, strategy. How to fight smart instead of just fighting hard. Captain Rock Han found himself teaching a class to Osir ship captains. The Osir were merchants, not warriors. But they had ships and they had motivation. They just needed to learn how to fight. "Your ships are faster than Krell ships," Rock Han explained. "Use that. Don't trade blows with them. Hit and run. Strike and retreat. Wear them down." The Osir captain, an older being with silver scales, nodded thoughtfully. "You humans make war sound like art." "It is," Rock Han said. "Terrible art, but art nonetheless. And like any art, it can be learned." 3 months after the Neri battle, the Krell made their move. A massive fleet assembled in deep space. Sensors counted over 800 ships. The largest Krell force ever seen. And it was heading toward the Sanctuary Belt. The message was clear. The Krell had lost battles, but they would win the war through sheer numbers. They would show humanity that choosing to fight had been a mistake. Admiral Day-Wan stood in the command center on Sanctuary Prime, looking at the tactical display. The Krell Armada arrived at the edge of the Sanctuary Belt like a storm made of flesh and metal. 800 bioships, each one pulsing with organic energy. They moved in a formation that looked almost like a living creature, flowing through space with purpose and hunger. On Sanctuary Prime, alarms rang out across every city. This was it, the moment everyone had feared. The Krell had come for humanity's home. Admiral Day-Wan stood in the command center. surrounded by tactical displays and communication officers. He looked old in this moment, the weight of 300 years pressing down on him. But his eyes were clear and his voice was steady. All defense platforms activate. All ships move to defensive positions. This is not a drill. This is what we prepared for. Across the sanctuary belt, humanity's defenses came to life. Orbital weapons platforms powered up. Minefields activated. And 200 human warships moved into carefully planned positions. The Krell sent a message. It wasn't in words because the Krell didn't use language the way other species did. It was in images and feelings, broadcast directly to human receivers. The message was simple: surrender or die. Chancellor Jin Quan had the authority to accept surrender. He was the civilian leader. He could order the fleet to stand down, save human lives, give the Krell what they wanted. He thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Send them our reply, he told Daewon. The Admiral nodded and opened a channel on all frequencies, knowing the entire galaxy was watching. This is Admiral Daewon of the Human Coalition Defense Fleet. You have come to our home. You have threatened our families. You have killed species that asked us for protection. We will not surrender. We will not run. We will defend our home and everyone in it. If you want to take what is ours, you will pay for every meter in blood. The Krell response was to attack. 800 ships surged forward. The first wave hit humanity's outer defenses. Minefields detonated, destroying dozens of Krell ships in the first minute. Orbital platforms fired, their weapons tearing through organic hulls. But the Krell kept coming, absorbing losses that would make any other species retreat. Captain Rock Han watched from the righteous dawn, positioned near a cluster of defense platforms. His hands gripped the armrests of his captain's chair. Around him, his crew worked with focused intensity. Here they come, Aranam said quietly. The Krell ships poured through the outer defenses like water through a broken dam. Hundreds of them. Too many to count. Too many to stop. But humanity wasn't trying to stop them. Not yet. All ships retreat to secondary positions, Admiral Daewon ordered. Execute Plan Hammer Strike. The human fleet pulled back, drawing the Krell deeper into the sanctuary belt. The Krell followed eagerly, thinking they were chasing a retreating enemy. But they were being led into a trap. The sanctuary belt wasn't just a cluster of human colonies. It was a carefully designed defensive network. Every asteroid, every moon, every space station had been positioned over 300 years to create natural choke points. And now with the Krell deep inside the belt, those choke points became kill zones. Now, Daewon said simply. The human fleet stopped retreating and turned. At the same time, hidden weapons platforms activated throughout the belt. The Krell suddenly found themselves surrounded, caught in overlapping fields of fire with no room to maneuver. Commodore Sol Bayek led her battle group in a devastating strike against the Krell left flank. Her ships moved in perfect coordination, each one covering the others. They tore through Krell formations like knives through cloth. On the unyielding truth, Sol Bayek watched the tactical display with fierce concentration. She had studied the old battles, learned the old tactics. Now she was applying them in real time, making decisions that meant life or death for thousands of beings. Target their command organisms, she ordered, the big ones in the center of each formation. Kill the brain, the body dies, her fleet obeyed. Missiles and energy beams focused on the largest Krell ships. These were the ones that coordinated the others, the ones that gave orders to the hive. When they died, the smaller ships became confused, their movements less organized. But even confused, the Krell were dangerous. And there were so many of them. Captain Rock Han found his ship surrounded by 5 Krell vessels. The Righteous Dawn fought desperately, but it was taking damage. Hull breaches in 3 sections. Shields failing. 1 engine offline. Captain, we need to retreat, his first officer said. Rock Han looked at the tactical display. If he retreated, it would open a gap in the formation. Other human ships would be exposed. More people would die. Negative, he said. We hold position. Captain, when I said we hold. The Righteous Dawn kept fighting. Aranam coordinated with other ships, calling for support. Kaiwan fired every weapon they had, even the ones that were technically offline. The engineering team worked miracles, keeping the ship together through sheer determination. Help came from an unexpected source. The Oseer merchants that Rock Han had trained appeared, their ships painted with new military markings. They weren't as skilled as human crews, but they were brave and they remembered what they had learned. Together with the Righteous Dawn, they destroyed the Krell attackers. "Captain Rockhan, this is Merchant Captain Vess," came a transmission. "You taught us to fight smart. Now we fight together." Rockhan felt tears in his eyes. "Thank you, Captain Vess." In the center of the battle, something was happening that nobody expected. The Eternal Vigil was arriving. Colonel Han Tae commanded the massive Titan-class battleship personally. She had spent 30 years maintaining this ship. Now she would see what it could do. The Eternal Vigil was 3 kilometers of pure destruction. Its main guns could destroy ships with single shots. Its fighter bays launched hundreds of automated drones. Its armor was thick enough to survive direct hits from weapons that would vaporize smaller ships. When it entered the battle, the Krell noticed. Dozens of their ships turned to face this new threat. They swarmed the Eternal Vigil like insects attacking a giant. But the giant was ready. "All weapons, free fire," Han Tai ordered. "Show them what humanity built." The Eternal Vigil opened fire. The effect was devastating. Krell ships exploded in rapid succession. The Titan's point defense system shot down every organic weapon that came near. Its fighters swarmed Krell formations, disrupting their coordination. But Han Tai knew the truth. The Eternal Vigil was a distraction. A big, loud, impossible-to-ignore distraction. While the Krell focused on destroying it, the rest of the human fleet was executing the real plan. Admiral Dae Wan watched from the last hope as the battle unfolded exactly as he had designed. The Krell were predictable. They attacked the biggest threat. They used numbers over strategy, and they didn't understand that sometimes the obvious target was bait. "Phase 3, he ordered. "All strike groups execute." Hidden throughout the sanctuary belt, human ships that had been waiting in silence powered up. These were the newest ships crewed by the youngest officers. They had been positioned specifically for this moment. They struck the Krell rear formations, the supply ships and command vessels that had stayed back from the main battle. These were the ships that coordinated the Krell's entire invasion. And now they were undefended. Commodore Sol Bayek led the strike personally. Her battle group tore through the Krell rear with ruthless efficiency. They targeted communication nodes, command organisms, anything that looked important. The effect on the Krell front lines was immediate. Without coordination from their command ships, the assault faltered. Individual Krell ships stopped following patterns. They became erratic, dangerous but disorganized. "All ships, full assault," Admiral Dae Wan commanded. "Break them." The human fleet surged forward. Every ship, every weapon, every tactic they had learned. The Krell fought back desperately, but they were losing cohesion. The hive mind that made them strong was fracturing. On the Eternal Vigil, Colonel Han Tai saw an opportunity. The Krell command ship, the biggest and most important, was exposed. If it died, the entire invasion would collapse. "Helm, full speed toward that command ship," she ordered. "Colonel, our shields are at 20%. If we get too close, I know. Do it anyway." The Eternal Vigil charged forward, taking devastating fire. Hull breaches appeared along its flanks. Entire sections went dark. But it kept moving, kept firing, unstoppable. Han Tai thought about her 30 years in the archives, all the lonely nights maintaining these ships, all the doubts about whether it was worth it. Now she knew. It had all been for this moment. "Brace for impact," she told her crew, "and thank you for serving with me." The Eternal Vigil rammed the Krell command ship at full speed. The collision was catastrophic. Both ships exploded in a blast of energy that lit up the entire sanctuary belt. Colonel Han Tae died instantly, along with her entire crew. 2,000 humans gone in a flash of light. But the Krell command ship was destroyed, and with it the coordination of the entire Krell fleet. The remaining Krell ships panicked. Some tried to fight. Others tried to flee. But they were deep in the sanctuary belt, surrounded by human ships and defense platforms. Very few escaped. The battle lasted 14 hours. When it ended, 632 Krell ships were destroyed. The remaining Krell fled in disorder. They would not return, not to human space. But the cost had been terrible.